Lila Brooks never expected the quiet evening at home to turn into the moment her entire world collapsed. She was sitting on the living room floor, braiding Ranger's fur the way she always did when she felt lonely, when a sudden crash echoed through the house, sharp, violent, like something priceless had shattered. Before she could even stand, Vivien Hale, her elegant stepmother with perfect blonde curls and a smile that never reached her eyes, stormed into the room holding a broken Tiffany vase in her trembling hands. "What did you do, Lila?" she hissed, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "And your dog, he's completely out of control." Lila froze. She hadn't moved an inch. Ranger had been curled at her feet the entire time, but Vivien didn't care. She tossed the shards onto the marble counter, letting the pieces scatter like evidence she'd been waiting to use. Her eyes glistened with the kind of tears people cry when they're performing. Vivien grabbed her iPhone and dialed the neighbor, raising her voice just enough to sound frantic. "Marcy, can you come over? Lila and the dog, they destroyed my living room. I think they're dangerous." Dangerous. The word hit Lila like a punch. Ranger stood up, ears sharp, sensing her fear. Lila tried to speak, tried to explain, but her voice barely escaped. Vivien paced around the room, pointing at scratches on the hardwood floor, a toppled lamp, even a torn pillow she'd found. Lila knew none of it was real. She also knew Vivien had arranged every detail. But this time was different. Vivien wasn't just blaming her. She was preparing something bigger, something planned, something cruel. And as Ranger growled softly, Lila realized Vivien's trap had only just begun. Lila stood frozen in the center of the living room as Marcy Lane, their elderly neighbor, stepped through the doorway. Marcy held a warm Starbucks cup in her hand, still wearing her quilted coat. Her eyes swept slowly across the chaotic room, broken vase, scattered cushions, overturned side table. It looked convincing, too convincing. Lila felt Ranger inch closer, pressing against her leg as if he knew she needed something solid to hold on to. Vivien wiped her tears dramatically with the sleeve of her cream-colored cardigan. "I tried to keep things calm, Marcy," she said, voice trembling. "But Lila, she snapped, and the dog, he jumped onto the table. Everything just fell apart." Marcy's brows pinched. "Lila, honey, is that true?" Lila shook her head so hard her hair whipped across her cheeks. "No, I didn't touch anything. Ranger didn't either. We were just sitting here. Vivien came in, holding the vase already broken." Vivien gasped softly, as if the lie wounded her personally. "Sweetheart, why would I break my own things? That vase was a gift. You know how much your father works for us to have nice things." Lila felt her face burn. She hated when Vivien said us, as if the home Grant bought long before Vivien existed somehow belonged to her. Vivien wrapped an arm around Marcy, guiding her toward the shattered vase like a tour guide walking through tragedy. You see the scratches? The mess? I don't know what's gotten into her lately. Grant's been overwhelmed at work, so maybe the stress is affecting her. Children act out when they feel neglected. Those words pierced Lila more deeply than any accusation. She wasn't acting out, she was trying her best. She always tried her best. Ranger let out a low whine, sensing her distress. Vivien immediately pointed at him. "See, he's being aggressive again. I told Grant that Breed can be unpredictable." "He's not aggressive," Lila cried, stepping protectively in front of Ranger. "He's scared because you're lying." Vivien slowly tilted her head, pitying in the most cutting way. "Lila, you really need help." Marcy hesitated, clearly conflicted, but Vivien continued weaving her narrative with gentle authority. "I'll talk to Grant tonight. Maybe we should consider moving Ranger outside for a while, and perhaps a behavior therapist could help Lila understand her actions." The room seemed to shrink around Lila. Ranger pressed tighter against her leg as if anchoring her from falling apart. She knew what Vivien was doing. She knew this wasn't an accident. Vivien was trying to separate her from the only friend she truly had. And as Marcy silently nodded, Lila felt the first crack of fear. Vivien's lies were starting to work. Long before Vivien Hale stepped into their lives with her soft perfume and perfectly rehearsed smile, the Brooks household used to feel warm. Lila remembered the way sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows when her mother cooked pancakes on Sunday mornings, humming old country songs. Back then, the house didn't look like a catalog. No marble centerpieces, no cold white furniture, no glass shelves displaying luxury items that Lila wasn't even allowed to breathe near. It looked lived in, loved, safe. Everything changed the year her mother died. Grant Brooks, a dedicated police officer, buried himself in work. He brought home reports, a MacBook Air filled with unfinished cases, an exhaustion that clung to him like a shadow. He tried to be present, but grief swallowed him whole, and with him gone most nights, Lila grew quieter, smaller, as if trying not to take up space in a world that kept shifting under her feet. Ranger came into her life 6 months later, a German Shepherd pup Grant adopted from a canine training friend. He became the heartbeat filling the empty rooms. Ranger watched over her, slept by her bed, nudged her gently whenever she cried into her pillow. He understood her in ways even adults couldn't. So when Vivien arrived, with her polished heels clicking through the hallway and her compliments that felt more like calculations, Lila knew immediately. Ranger didn't trust her. And neither did she. At first, Vivien pretended to be kind. She baked cookies, asked about school, even bought Lila a small citizen watch to help you manage your time like a grown-up. But her sweetness faded the moment Grant wasn't around. She scolded Lila for leaving fingerprints on the fridge. She accused Ranger of shedding too much near the couch. She rearranged the house until none of Lila's childhood photos were visible, replacing them with framed prints Vivien claimed were more elegant. Lila didn't tell her father. She didn't want to add more weight to the burden he already carried. Still, the house felt colder each day. Vivien's rules multiplied. Ranger was kept further from the main rooms, and Lila learned to stay in the background, trying to keep peace where none existed. But the night Vivien blamed her for the broken vase, something deeper cracked open in Lila's chest, a fear she'd been holding back ever since losing her mother. Because if Vivien was willing to lie that easily, if she could twist the truth so effortlessly, then Lila worried the next thing Vivien tried to take away wouldn't be a vase, or a room, or even Ranger. It might be her place in her own home. Vivien Hale had a talent for appearing harmless. With her soft laugh, manicured hands, and calm voice, she could convince anyone she was the perfect wife, the perfect stepmother, the perfect woman. But behind closed doors, behind the silence when Grant wasn't home, her real nature sharpened like glass edges hidden under silk. Vivien controlled the house with an iron grip wrapped in velvet. She rearranged every room until nothing reflected Lila's childhood anymore. Family photos disappeared. Ranger's toys were tossed into the garage. Even Lila's backpack wasn't safe. Vivien inspected it every evening under the pretense of teaching responsibility. But the control wasn't the worst part. It was the unpredictability. One day, Vivien would smile and offer Lila a warm cocoa from Starbucks. The next, she'd snatch the mug away and scold her for being careless, even though Lila hadn't moved an inch. Ranger sensed the tension instantly. Whenever Vivien walked in, his ears pinned back and his body stiffened, like he was preparing to shield Lila from something invisible yet familiar. Vivien hated that. She hated how Ranger guarded Lila. She hated how Lila trusted Ranger more than her. But most of all, she hated that Grant adored the dog he brought home during the hardest chapter of their lives. The more Vivien felt her influence slipping, the more unpredictable she became. One afternoon, when Grant was at the precinct reviewing a case, Vivien cornered Lila in the hallway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Except for the faint hum of the central heating. Vivien stood inches away, her smile tight, her eyes cold. "Do you know what men want, Lila?" she asked softly. "Peace, order, a wife who makes life easier, not chaos." Lila swallowed. "I don't cause chaos." Vivien leaned down. "But that's the problem. You don't realize you do. And Grant listens to me. He trusts me. One day he might have to make a choice about what keeps this house stable and who doesn't." Lila felt her chest tighten. Was that a threat? Before she could respond, a loud thump echoed from the living room. Vivien's expression twisted. Ranger had nudged a decorative pillow off the couch. Just a pillow, nothing more. But Vivien reacted as if the world had shattered. "That dog is dangerous," she screamed, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "He's destroying everything." Lila rushed to Ranger, holding him close. "He didn't do anything." Vivien's voice dropped back to icy calm. "We'll see what your father thinks tonight." And for the first time, Lila realized something terrifying. Vivien wasn't acting out of anger. She was building a case. The tension in the Brooks household erupted on a Thursday evening, the kind of cold night where the air felt heavy and every sound echoed too loudly. Grant was scheduled for a late shift, so Vivien took advantage of his absence to stage something bigger, something that couldn't be dismissed as a simple misunderstanding. Lila sensed it the moment she walked into the living room after school. Vivien was already dressed in a sleek beige coat, hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless. It was the kind of polished look she wore when she wanted to play a role. "Get your shoes, Lila," Vivien said smoothly. "We're going to meet the neighbors." Lila hesitated. "Why, did something happen?" Vivien's smile widened, but her eyes stayed cold. "Yes, and it's time everyone sees it." They walked down the street to Marcy Lane's house, where several neighbors were gathered for a small community get-together. The moment Vivien stepped inside, all conversation quieted. She placed a trembling hand on her chest and let out a soft, shaky breath. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she began, "but something terrible happened today. And I think it's time people knew." Lila's heart dropped. Ranger, sensing her fear, pressed against her side, tail lowered. Vivien held up her iPhone, displaying photos she had taken, the couch cushions she had ripped, the lamp she had knocked over herself, the scratch marks she had created with a kitchen fork. The images made the living room look like a battleground. "This is what I came home to," Vivien said loudly, letting her voice break. "Lila lost control, and her dog. He lunged at me." Gasps filled the room. "He didn't," Lila cried, voice cracking. "Ranger never touched her." But Vivien wasn't finished. She gently lifted her sleeve, revealing a faint red mark, one she'd made earlier by scratching herself against the edge of a drawer. It wasn't deep, but it was just dramatic enough to convince anyone who didn't know the truth. "I'm scared," Vivien whispered. "I don't feel safe around them." Every pair of eyes shifted to Lila and Ranger, judging, doubting. Lila felt her throat tighten as the world tilted out of her control. Marcy stepped closer. "Lila, sweetheart, did Ranger really do that?" "No!" Lila shouted, tears welling. "Vivien is lying. Please believe me." Vivien exhaled sadly, as though heartbroken by Lila's denial. "This is what I've been dealing with. Emotional outbursts, aggression. I don't know how much more I can take." Lila's tears finally spilled. Ranger whimpered beside her. And then Vivien delivered the final blow, soft, calm, rehearsed. "Maybe it's time Grant considers rehoming the dog." Lila felt her world crack open, because in that moment she understood. Vivien was ready to take Ranger away for good. Grant Brooks walked through the front door close to midnight, shoulders slumped, uniform wrinkled, the weight of another long shift settling in his bones. The precinct had been chaos that day. A missing person report, paperwork piling on his desk, and a supervisor demanding answers he didn't have. All he wanted was a hot shower, a quiet house, and 5 minutes to breathe. Instead, he walked straight into tension so thick he could feel it before anyone spoke. Vivien sat on the couch, wrapped in a soft white throw blanket, eyes red as if she'd been crying for hours. Lila sat on the staircase, clutching Ranger's collar, her face pale from holding back tears. Ranger stood alert beside her, gaze fixed on Vivien with an intensity Grant hadn't seen before. Grant's heart tightened. "What happened?" Vivien inhaled shakily, already playing her part. "Grant, I didn't want to tell you like this. I tried to handle it. I really did." Lila's voice broke through, desperate and trembling. "Dad, she's lying. I didn't do anything. Ranger didn't do anything." Vivien looked away as if the accusation wounded her deeply. "I know she's overwhelmed," she whispered. "Losing her mother, then you being gone so much. I understand. But today things went too far." Grant ran a tired hand over his face. "Just tell me what happened." Vivien pulled out her iPhone, showing him the photos again. The staged chaos, the broken lamp, the scratches on the hardwood floor. She lifted her sleeve to reveal the faint mark. "I came home and found the house destroyed, and when I tried to calm things down, Ranger lunged at me. I'm scared, Grant. I don't feel safe." Grant's stomach dropped. Ranger attacking? It didn't make sense. That dog had been gentle since the day he brought him home. But the pictures. Vivien's trembling voice, the neighbors who had already called him earlier to check if everything was okay. It all swirled together until he couldn't separate fatigue from logic. "Dad, please," Lila whispered. "Ranger was with me the whole time. She broke everything herself." Vivien wiped a tear. "I wish that were true." Grant looked between them, his daughter pleading, his wife shaking, and exhaustion clouded his judgment. He knelt in front of Ranger, who stood still, staring back with steady, loyal eyes. "Ranger," he said softly, "did you hurt Vivien?" The dog didn't move. Vivien let out a broken sob. "See, he's unpredictable." Grant exhaled, defeated. Maybe we need to separate them for a while, just until things calm down." Lila's breath hitched. "No, Dad, please." But before she could finish, Grant said the words that shattered her. "Ranger needs to stay in the garage tonight." And Lila felt something inside her begin to collapse because Vivien's plan was working, and her father was slipping away. The next morning felt colder than usual, even though the heat was running. Lila woke early, unable to stop thinking about Ranger sleeping alone in the drafty garage. She slipped on her hoodie, grabbed a piece of toast, and tiptoed toward the door to check on him. Before she reached it, Vivien's sharp voice sliced through the hallway. "Lila, stop right there." Lila froze. Vivien stood by the kitchen island, wearing a silky robe and holding something wrapped in a white towel. Her expression was strangely calm. Too calm. What is that?" Lila asked. Vivien unwrapped the towel with slow dramatics, revealing the shattered remains of another Tiffany glass piece. This one a small turquoise bowl Grant had given her for their anniversary. The elegant signature swirl pattern was unmistakable, even in ruins. Lila's stomach sank. "I didn't break that." Vivien raised one eyebrow. "Of course you didn't, but your dog? That's another story." Lila felt her pulse spike. "Ranger has been in the garage all night." "Yes," Vivien said smoothly, walking closer, "which makes this even more concerning." She placed the broken bowl on the counter, arranging the shards like evidence in a courtroom. Then she pointed to the back door, left ajar by only an inch. "I woke up to a noise. When I came downstairs, the door was open, and this," she gestured to the shards, "was on the floor. Ranger must have gotten out." "That's impossible," Lila whispered. "You locked the door. Dad locked it too." Vivien sighed dramatically. "Locks fail. Animals get desperate. Maybe he was anxious after everything yesterday." The accusation stung deeper than anything before. Vivien wasn't just blaming Ranger. She was painting him as dangerous, unpredictable, out of control. She was building a pattern, a story, a narrative that adults would believe even if it wasn't true. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice so only Lila could hear. "When your father sees this, he'll finally understand what kind of dog you've been protecting." Lila's throat tightened. "You did this," she whispered. "You're framing him." Vivien smiled, not sweetly, but with satisfaction. "Careful, Lila. Lies only make things worse." Before Lila could respond, Grant entered the kitchen, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked. Vivien immediately rushed toward him, voice trembling. "Grant, I'm scared. Ranger got out somehow, and he broke this again." She held up the broken Tiffany bowl like a wounded treasure. Grant's face paled. "Ranger got out? How?" "He must have pushed the door open," Vivien said. "I don't feel safe with him here anymore." Lila desperately shook her head, tears forming. "Dad, she's setting us up. Ranger never left the garage, I promise." Grant looked torn, exhausted, overwhelmed. Vivien wrapped her arms around herself. How many more incidents before something worse happens? And in that moment, Lila realized something chilling. Vivien wasn't trying to scare her anymore. She was preparing to get rid of Ranger permanently. The house felt heavier after the Tiffany bowl incident, as if every wall leaned inward, pressuring Lila from all sides. Grant left early for the precinct, promising to look into the situation, but sounding far from convinced. Ranger was moved from the garage to the fenced backyard, where he paced anxiously, confused by the sudden distance forced between him and the girl he protected. His ears perked every time Lila approached a window, but Vivien always seemed to materialize before she could slip outside. By noon, Vivien had rewritten the household rules. No dog inside the house unless supervised. No entering the backyard without permission. No raising your voice, Lila. It causes Ranger to become agitated. Each rule felt like a blade slicing another thread between Lila and the only companion she trusted. Vivien placed the printed rule sheet on the refrigerator, smoothing it neatly with her manicured hands. "These guidelines will keep everyone safe," she said in a tone dripping with false concern. Lila stared at the paper, barely recognizing the home she once knew. "You're doing this on purpose," she murmured. Vivien didn't even deny it. "I'm protecting this family. Someone has to." That afternoon, Lila tried again to sneak into the backyard. Ranger pressed his nose through the fence slats, tail wagging weakly, a soft whine escaping his throat. Lila reached toward him, but Vivien's sharp command cut through the air like a whip. "Step away from the fence!" Lila flinched. Vivien stood by the sliding door, arms crossed, iPhone in hand as though she had been recording. "You're not allowed back there unsupervised," Vivien said coolly. "Your father agreed." "That's not true," Lila whispered. Vivien shrugged. "He will." Lila's breath trembled in her chest. The world felt lopsided, tilting against her no matter how hard she tried to stand straight. Ranger pawed at the ground behind the fence, distressed. Vivien slid the door shut, cutting him off completely. The sound echoed like a prison lock. Later that evening, Vivien set up a new routine. Lila was to stay in her room until dinner. No TV, no backyard, no dog. She framed it as rest time, but Lila understood the truth. This was isolation, control, punishment for resisting. And worst of all, Grant still didn't know the full extent of what was happening inside his own home. As Lila sat on the edge of her bed, listening to Ranger's muffled barks from the yard, she felt the first spark of something she hadn't felt before. Not just fear, but determination. Because she suddenly realized, if she didn't fight back soon, Vivien would take Ranger away forever. The next morning, the house was silent. Too silent. Vivien had left early for a brunch meeting, her perfume still lingering faintly in the hallway. Grant was at the precinct again. That left Lila alone, except for Ranger pacing restlessly in the backyard, eager to be close to her. The cold November air seeped through the windows, but Lila barely felt it. She had one mission: prove Ranger's innocence. She waited until she heard Vivien's car pull away, then hurried downstairs to the scene of the supposed break-in, the spot where the Tiffany bowl had shattered the day before. Vivien had cleaned it thoroughly, almost obsessively, but Lila knew forced perfection always left cracks. She knelt beside the baseboard, running her fingers slowly across the wood. A tiny glimmer caught her eye, so faint she almost missed it. She leaned closer. A single strand of hair. Long, smooth, platinum blonde. Her heart thudded. Vivien's hair. Not hers, not Grant's, and certainly not Ranger's. Lila picked it up carefully, holding it between her fingers like a fragile piece of truth. Vivien had insisted Ranger broke the bowl. Vivien claimed he escaped the garage. Vivien claimed he lunged at her. But this hair proved something entirely different. Vivien had been the one at the scene. A spark of hope flickered inside Lila, a rare feeling lately. She quickly placed the hair inside a small Ziploc bag she found in the junk drawer. Grant always told her, evidence needs to be protected. She wondered what he would say if he knew his daughter was collecting it against his own wife. Before she could hide the bag, Ranger barked urgently from outside. Not panicked, but alert, Lila rushed to the back door and saw him staring toward the driveway, ears raised. Moments later, a black SUV slowed in front of the house. The window rolled down slightly. Vivien. She wasn't supposed to be back yet. Lila's stomach clenched. She shoved the baggie into her hoodie pocket and darted upstairs just as the front door opened. Vivien's heels clicked sharply against the hardwood. Too sharp, too fast. "Lila?" she called, voice sweet but strained. "I forgot something." Lila's heart raced. Did she know? Had she seen something on the cameras? Did she suspect Lila was digging into the truth? She held her breath as Vivien walked through the downstairs rooms, humming softly. A sound that felt more like a warning than a melody. Finally, the footsteps faded. Lila exhaled shakily. She reached into her pocket and pressed her fingers against the baggie. The hair was still there, solid, real. For the first time, she had proof. But as Ranger barked again, louder this time, sharper, Lila realized something chilling. Vivien wasn't the only one watching. Someone else had seen Lila find that hair. All afternoon, Lila felt the weight of the blonde hair tucked inside her hoodie pocket. It was the first real proof she had. yet fear gnawed at her. Proof didn't mean anything if no one believed her. Grant was exhausted, overwhelmed, and already pulled halfway into Vivien's lies. Lila needed someone outside the house, someone who had seen the strange shifts, someone who didn't look at Vivien with blind trust. So after school, when Vivien claimed she needed quiet time and retreated to her bedroom with a glass of white wine, Lila slipped out the back door. Ranger whimpered softly behind the fence, tail wagging as he watched her. She pressed her fingers against the wooden slats. "I'll fix this," she whispered. Then she hurried toward Marcy Lane's house. Marcy opened the door before Lila could knock twice. "Sweetheart," she said gently, noticing the trembling in Lila's hands. "What's wrong?" The words poured out of Lila, not loudly but with the rawness of someone who had held too much inside. She told Marcy about the broken vase, the staged photos, the backyard accusations, and the bowl incident. Then, with a hesitant breath, she pulled the small Ziploc bag from her pocket and placed it in Marcy's palm. "I found this near the broken bowl," Lila said. "It's Vivien's. She's framing Ranger. She's lying about everything." Marcy held the strand of platinum blonde hair up to the light. Her face didn't show shock, only sadness, and something that looked like confirmation. "I've suspected she wasn't being honest," Marcy admitted quietly. "I've seen her lose her temper with delivery drivers. She can flip in an instant, then smile like nothing happened. People like that, they're dangerous in ways you don't see right away." Lila swallowed hard. "Can you tell my dad? He listens to adults more than me." Marcy sighed. "I will, but evidence needs context. If we go to him too early, Vivien will twist the story. We need to be careful." Careful. Lila had been careful for months, and Vivien was still winning. Marcy reached out and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're brave, Lila. What you're doing, it's the right thing. But we need more than just one hair. We need something she can't talk her way out of." Before Lila could respond, a dark sedan rolled slowly past the house. The same black SUV from earlier. Vivien. She wasn't looking at the road. She was watching them. Lila's breath caught. Marcy noticed, too. The SUV didn't stop, but the message was clear. Vivien knew Lila had gone somewhere, and she did not like it. As the car disappeared around the corner, Marcy whispered, "Sweetheart, I think Vivien just realized you're no longer afraid of her." The house felt unnaturally still when Lila returned from Marcy's place. Vivien's SUV wasn't in the driveway, but that didn't comfort her. Vivien's silence was always more dangerous than her anger. Ranger immediately ran to the fence, tail thumping the ground, whining softly as if sensing something heavy hanging in the air. "I'll come back," Lila whispered, giving him one quick stroke before slipping inside. The moment she shut the door, a sharp click echoed. Vivien was standing at the top of the stairs, arms folded, her expression carved into something cold and calculating. "Where were you, Lila?" Her voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. Vivien only whispered when she was angry enough to break something. "I went for a walk," Lila said. She kept her tone steady, remembering Marcy's warning. "Be careful." Vivien descended the stairs slowly, the heel of each step punctuating the silence. "Funny," she murmured, "because I drove past Marcy's house, and I saw you going inside." Lila's stomach tightened. "We're neighbors. I'm allowed to visit her." Vivien leaned in. Not close enough to touch, but close enough for Lila to smell her perfume, the same one she sprayed on whenever she was pretending to be harmless. "You went there to talk about me." Lila's breath caught. Vivien's smile sharpened. "Did you tell her I'm the villain in your little fantasy?" She tapped a manicured finger under Lila's chin. "You're becoming quite the storyteller." Before Lila could step back, Vivien grabbed her wrist. Not painfully, but firmly enough to send a message. "Let me teach you something important, sweetheart. Adults talk, and when adults talk about a child who lies, people listen." Vivien released her and walked toward the den. "Come here." Reluctantly, Lila followed. Vivien pointed at the door to the small pantry under the stairs, a narrow space with no windows. "I want you to stay in here for a bit. You need time to calm down." Lila felt her heart drop. "No." "Yes," Vivien said softly, "because your father will be home soon, and I refuse to let him walk into more chaos." Lila shook her head, backing away. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly. And sitting quietly in here will prove that you're capable of behaving." Vivien opened the door, revealing the dim space inside. Go on." When Lila didn't move, Vivien's expression hardened. "If you force me to call Grant, I'll tell him you tried to hit me. Do you understand?" The threat froze Lila in place. She stepped inside the small pantry, her breath trembling. Vivien closed the door with slow finality. A second later, click, the lock slid into place. Darkness swallowed Lila as Ranger barked frantically from the backyard, sensing her panic. And in that crushing silence, Lila realized Vivien didn't just want to control her, she wanted to break her. Grant Brooks pulled into the driveway just after sunset, exhausted but relieved to be home after a long day of interviews and paperwork. His supervisor had been on edge, and every officer felt the tension. Grant stepped out of his car, stretching stiffly, and paused. Ranger was pacing the backyard again, barking in sharp, distressed bursts. Grant frowned. Ranger didn't bark like that unless something was wrong. Inside the house, the lights were dim. Vivien appeared from the kitchen wearing a soft gray sweater and carrying a glass of Chardonnay. She greeted him with a weary smile. "You're home late," she murmured, brushing a hand lightly against his arm. "Rough day?" Grant forced a tired nod. "Yeah, what's going on with Ranger? He sounds upset." Vivien sighed dramatically, taking a sip of her wine. "He's been like that all afternoon. Honestly, it's getting worse. I think he senses the chaos in this house." Grant stiffened. "Where's Lila?" Vivien's eyes flickered, just for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a gentle expression. "Upstairs, I think. She needed some quiet time after another emotional episode." Something about the way she said it bothered him. Grant headed toward the stairs, but Vivien stepped subtly into his path. "Grant, before you talk to her, I need you to keep an open mind. She's been saying things about me. Strange things." Vivien shook her head softly. "She's not well, sweetheart. She's confused, and I'm worried." Grant stopped mid-step. Vivien rarely called him sweetheart unless she was trying to nudge his thinking in a particular direction. He cleared his throat. "What exactly happened today?" Vivien lowered her gaze. "I asked her to help with chores, and she became upset. Very upset. She accused me of things that aren't true." She let her voice tremble. "I think losing her mother so young left deeper scars than we realized." Grant felt the familiar ache in his chest. He hated when anyone brought up his late wife, but he especially hated when that grief was used as an explanation for everything Lila struggled with. Still, something didn't add up. Ranger's barks intensified, scratching sounds echoing from the backyard. Grant glanced toward the back door. "It sounds like he's trying to warn us." Vivien laughed lightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Dogs bark, Grant. He's reacting to Lila's energy." He took a slow breath, instinct prickling. Years of police work had taught him how to read people, and right now, something felt off. Terribly off. "I'm going to check on Lila," he said. Vivien's hand tightened around her wine glass. "Grant, don't—" But he was already heading toward the hallway. Ranger barked louder, each sound more desperate. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Grant felt a cold suspicion forming. What if Lila wasn't the problem at all? Grant climbed the stairs 2 at a time, tension grinding through his shoulders. Something wasn't right. He knocked softly on Lila's door first. No answer. "Lila?" he called more firmly. Silence. Grant tried the knob. It turned easily. The room was empty. Blankets neatly folded, backpack untouched. A chill moved through him. She never left her room this tidy. He headed back down the hall. Ranger's frantic barking echoed through the walls, sharper now, as if he sensed something hidden behind them. Grant paused, listening. A faint sound, shallow breaths, seemed to come from downstairs. He followed the noise, instincts rising. Vivien appeared behind him suddenly, her smile tight. "Darling, I told you she's—" But he ignored her, heading toward the pantry under the stairs. Ranger's barks intensified, clawing sounds scraping against the back fence. Grant reached for the pantry handle. Locked. His pulse kicked. "Vivien, why is this locked?" Vivien stepped forward quickly, too quickly. That door sticks sometimes. I didn't want Lila going in there. It's messy." Grant stared at her. He'd lived in this house for 15 years. That door had never stuck. He yanked the handle again. "Lila, are you in there?" A faint whimper. His entire body froze. Vivien's voice turned sharp. "Grant, she locked herself in. She had another outburst, and I tried to calm her down." Grant didn't wait for the excuses. He grabbed a flathead screwdriver from the nearby drawer, inserted it into the lock, and snapped it open with one forceful twist. The door swung wide. Lila sat curled on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes red and terrified. The room was dark, air stale. Grant's heart dropped into his stomach. Dad," she whispered hoarsely. "She locked me in." Grant lifted her into his arms instantly. His chest tightened with fury and guilt. He had let this happen. Vivien stepped back, hands raised as though she were the victim. "Grant, she's lying. She went in there herself after screaming at me. I was trying to give her space." Lila shook her head violently against his shoulder. "No, she made me go in. She said you'd believe her over me." Vivien's mouth tightened, eyes flickering with something sharp and ugly before softening again. "Sweetheart, she's confused. You know how children make up stories when they're overwhelmed." Grant felt something inside him twist. Vivien had explanations for everything, too many explanations, too perfect, too polished, like someone performing for an invisible audience. Then Ranger barked again, 3 sharp, deliberate sounds. Lila clung tighter to Grant. "Dad, she's trying to get rid of Ranger. Please don't let her." Grant looked from his trembling daughter to his eerily calm wife. Vivien smiled, but her eyes were ice. "I only want what's best for this family," she said. And for the first time, Grant saw the truth behind her mask. Vivien wasn't losing control, she was escalating. Grant didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of Lila's bed while she finally drifted off from exhaustion, clutching Ranger's old bandana like a lifeline. Vivien kept her distance, but every time Grant caught a glimpse of her, she wore that soft expression, one that begged for sympathy but hid something colder underneath. By morning, the unease had thickened into something heavier. Grant stood in the kitchen sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out at Ranger in the backyard. The dog was pacing again, ears pinned forward, clearly sensing the tension inside the house. Vivien descended the stairs slowly, wearing a pale blue blouse and an expression crafted to appear fragile. "Grant," she murmured, "I made some calls last night." He didn't turn around. "What kind of calls?" Vivien hesitated just long enough to appear reluctant. "To the county animal behavior office. I had to, after what happened yesterday. Your daughter was locked in a room, your dog is growing more unpredictable, and I'm scared." Grant's jaw clenched. He didn't lock her in that pantry. Vivien swallowed, eyes glistening. "I know you want to believe the best, but Lila is troubled. She needs help, and Ranger is only making things worse." Before Grant could respond, a white county truck pulled into the driveway. Lila appeared in her doorway upstairs the moment she heard the engine, eyes wide, face pale. "Dad, what is that?" Vivien stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Grant's arm. "They're just here to evaluate the dog. It's standard procedure." Lila rushed down the stairs. "No, they can't take him." Grant felt something twist painfully inside him. "Vivien, you should have talked to me first." "I tried," she whispered. "But you were overwhelmed, and I didn't want someone to get hurt because we hesitated." 2 officers approached the backyard gate with calm professionalism. Ranger barked, not aggressively but anxiously, pacing back and forth as they unlatched the gate. Lila shoved past her father, tears spilling. "Please don't take him. He didn't do anything." One officer knelt. "Sweetheart, we just need to take him for observation. It's temporary." Ranger whimpered, pressing his nose into Lila's hands. She clung to him desperately. "Dad, please!" she cried. "Stop them!" Grant's throat tightened. He looked at Vivien, who stood behind them with her hands clasped, eyes shining with manufactured grief, and something sickened him. She was enjoying this. She had orchestrated this. But he was trapped. Legally, he couldn't interfere once the order was processed. The officers gently guided Ranger toward the truck. Lila followed until she couldn't anymore, collapsing to her knees as the tailgate closed. Ranger barked once, long, mournful, echoing. Vivien stepped beside Grant and whispered, "This is for the best." Grant didn't reply, because as the truck pulled away, he finally understood. Vivien wasn't afraid of Ranger at all. She was afraid of what he might expose. The house felt hollow after Ranger was taken, like someone had removed its heartbeat. Lila lay curled on the couch, eyes swollen, still listening for barks that would never come. Grant paced the living room, replaying the morning's events over and over, each time feeling a sharper sting of regret. He'd let the system take a dog he knew, deep down, wasn't capable of what Vivien claimed. Vivien, meanwhile, floated through the house with unsettling ease. She tidied already clean counters, lit a vanilla candle, and hummed softly, as if the chaos she had created was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Every time Grant looked at her, a knot of suspicion tightened inside him. Near dusk, a notification pinged on his phone. Grant glanced at the screen. Unknown number, a text message. "I think you need to see this." Marcy. Attached was a video file. He tapped it open. The footage was grainy, taken from Marcy's doorbell camera. It showed the Brooks' front yard the day Vivien claimed Ranger had lunged at her. The timestamp matched perfectly. Grant leaned closer. Vivien stood alone in the yard, pacing in tight circles, muttering under her breath. She glanced toward the house, then toward the camera, almost checking to see if she was being watched. Then, slowly, she lifted her left arm and dragged it along the edge of the porch railing. Hard, deliberate. She winced dramatically afterward, cradling her arm the same way she had shown Grant later. Grant's stomach dropped. She had injured herself, staged it, lied to him, and that was only half of it. Seconds later, Vivien walked into frame again, carrying the decorative pillow she later claimed Ranger had torn. Except here, caught on video, Vivien ripped the seam herself, pulling out stuffing and scattering it onto the lawn. She kept glancing over her shoulder, ensuring no one saw. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't stress. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intentional deception. He reopened the video from the start, replaying each movement. Every lie Vivien had told suddenly clicked into place. He texted Marcy back, "How long have you had this?" Her reply came fast. "I wasn't sure what I was seeing at first, but after Lila visited me, I checked my footage again. You need to protect that child, Grant." Protect. The word hit him hard. He looked toward the kitchen where Vivien stood slicing fruit, humming as if her conscience were spotless. Lila, still curled on the couch, watched her father with red, hopeful eyes. "Dad, did something happen?" Grant couldn't speak yet. His pulse hammered with betrayal, clarity, and a slow-burning anger he hadn't felt in years. Because this video wasn't just proof. It was the beginning of Vivien's unraveling, and Grant was finally ready to confront the truth. Grant stepped onto the back porch, shutting the sliding door behind him before Vivien could follow. He needed air, space, a moment to steady the storm building inside him. The video from Marcy replayed in his mind. Vivien scratching her own arm, ripping the pillow, scattering stuffing. Every frame exposed a truth he had refused to believe. His wife had been staging everything. He stared at the empty backyard where Ranger once paced, loyal and confused. The silence felt wrong, too clean, too controlled, just like Vivien wanted the entire house to be. Grant took a long breath and pulled out his phone. He texted Marcy again. "Keep the video safe. Don't send it to anyone else yet." Her response came instantly. "I'm here if you or Lila need anything." He pocketed the phone and re-entered the house, masking his expression. Vivien stood at the counter arranging fruit slices on a plate, humming lightly. When she looked up, her smile was soft, practiced, perfect. "You look upset," she said sweetly. "Rough day?" Grant forced a neutral tone. "Something like that." Vivien walked closer, fingertips brushing his sleeve. "We're doing the right thing, you know. About Ranger. Lila needs stability." He stepped back subtly. Vivien didn't miss it. Her smile faltered. "Grant," she said, voice tightening, "is there something you want to tell me?" He shook his head lightly. "I just need a shower." It wasn't a lie. He needed time alone to think, to plan. Upstairs, after locking the bedroom door, Grant retrieved a small evidence kit from his closet. A habit from years on the force, keeping tools nearby just in case. He pulled out fingerprint dust, swabs, and a small camera. Then he went to the living room. The Tiffany bowl shards had been thrown away, but Vivien wasn't meticulous enough to erase everything. Grant dusted the baseboard where Lila found the hair. A faint smudge appeared, delicate, swirling, unmistakably Vivien's fingerprint. He photographed it. Next, he checked the back door. The lock showed no signs of forced entry, contradicting Vivien's story about Ranger pushing it open. He noted that, too. Piece by piece, he collected what Vivien hadn't considered, real evidence. When he finished, footsteps creaked behind him. Vivien stood at the edge of the hallway, watching him with a strange, probing expression. Her eyes flicked to the open evidence kit. "Oh, what are you doing?" she asked quietly. Grant closed the case calmly. "House repairs," he said, "just checking for damage." Vivien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She didn't believe him, and Grant realized with chilling clarity that Vivien was beginning to feel cornered. He walked past her without another word, because now he wasn't just suspicious. He was building a case, and Vivien had no idea how much he already knew. Vivien barely slept that night. Grant could feel it in the way the mattress shifted, stiff and tense beneath her perfectly still body. She didn't ask to cuddle like she sometimes did when she wanted him soft, pliable, easy to steer. She lay awake, calculating, and Grant pretended not to notice. He needed her to believe he was still under her spell. By morning, he knew something was coming. It didn't take long. Vivien descended the stairs wearing a crisp white blouse and tailored pants, her professional problem-solver outfit. She carried a leather folder under her arm and a look of delicate concern framed carefully on her face. Lila, who had been sitting silently at the kitchen table, stiffened the moment Vivien walked in. "Good morning," Vivien said lightly, too lightly. "I made some calls today." Grant tensed. "What calls?" Vivien opened the folder and slid a sheet of paper across the table toward him. "I scheduled a behavioral evaluation for Lila with a specialist. She's been under so much stress and her outbursts. Well, it's time we help her." Lila's face drained of color. "Dad, no, Vivien's lying. I never—" Vivien held up a hand. "Sweetheart, this isn't a punishment. This is support. You've been seeing things that aren't real, making accusations, hiding from me." "Hiding?" Lila choked out. "You locked me in a pantry." Vivien's expression softened with devastating precision. She said the same thing to the specialist. Children sometimes fabricate stories to make sense of overwhelming emotions. Grant felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Show nothing. Not yet." "And," Vivien continued, "I also called the county shelter. Considering the severity of Ranger's behavior, they recommended evaluating whether he's safe to return home at all." Lila slammed her hand on the table, tears spilling. "You're trying to get rid of him forever." Vivien sighed dramatically. "If that's what the experts determine, then yes, we have to think of safety first." She turned to Grant, eyes glistening. "I know this is hard, but you have to stop letting your emotions cloud your judgment." That line, the one she'd used on him for months, snapped something inside him. Before he could speak, Vivien stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper sharp enough to cut glass. "Grant, if you resist this, it will look like you're ignoring your daughter's mental health. That won't reflect well. Not at work, not in a custody situation. You understand?" "A custody situation?" Grant went still. Vivien wasn't just escalating, she was threatening to take Lila from him. Lila grabbed his hand, trembling. "Dad, please don't let her." Vivien watched them both, confidence flickering in her icy smile. She thought she had him cornered, but Grant had already made his decision, and Vivien had no idea the trap she was walking into next. The tension in the kitchen hung thick enough to suffocate. Vivien stood poised, smug, certain she had cornered both father and daughter with her threats. Grant kept his jaw clenched, steadying his breath. He needed to let things unfold, to give Lila space to speak. She had been silenced for too long. Lila wiped the tears from her face. Her small hands shook, but something in her posture shifted. A straightening of the spine, a tightening of her shoulders. She'd been pushed into darkness repeatedly, punished, isolated, but not broken. Not today. "Dad," she said, voice trembling but firm, "I need you to really listen, not to her, to me." Vivien's eyes narrowed. "Lila." "No." Lila turned to her stepmother, surprising both adults with the sharpness in her voice. "You don't get to talk right now." Grant's breath hitched. He had never heard his daughter speak with such clarity, such courage. Vivien forced a laugh. "This is exactly what I mean. The emotional instability." "Stop pretending." Lila took a step forward. "You locked me in that pantry. You told me Dad would believe you over me. You broke your own bowl. You hurt your own arm, and Ranger never attacked you. You lied about everything." Vivien froze, just for a second, but Grant caught it. Lila reached into her pocket. Her fingers shook as she pulled out the plastic bag containing the strand of platinum blonde hair, her first piece of proof. I found this by the broken bowl. Your hair, not mine, not Dad's, not Ranger's. Vivien's face drained of color before she forced a smile again. Sweetheart, that means nothing. Hair can fall anywhere. Not wedged under the baseboard, Lila replied. You cleaned everything. You missed one thing. Grant felt pride swell in his chest. Lila had paid attention, more than anyone realized. And there's more, Lila continued, voice strengthening. Marcy saw some things too. She told Dad. She said you lose your temper. She said she saw you yelling at people when you think no one is watching. Vivien's composure cracked. Her lips tightened, her cheeks twitched, her eyes flashed something sharp and dangerous. Lila, she said, voice low, you have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, I do. Lila stepped closer to her father and held his hand. Dad, I'm done being scared. She wants you to think I'm lying so she can get rid of Ranger. And then, maybe me. Vivien inhaled sharply. That is outrageous. Grant raised a hand, stopping her. Vivien, he said quietly. It's her turn. Vivien's eyes widened, realizing finally, terrifyingly, that she was losing control. Lila looked up at her father, voice breaking yet filled with courage. Dad, please believe me now. And in that moment, Grant did. Because this wasn't the voice of a troubled child. This was the voice of a girl who had finally found her strength. And Vivien felt the ground shift under her feet. Grant stood completely still, one hand holding Lila's, the other slowly curling into a fist at his side. Vivien sensed it, the shift, the awakening, and panic flickered in her eyes before she forced another perfect smile back onto her face. Grant, she said softly, stepping toward him, you're tired. You're overwhelmed. She's manipulating you. Children do that when they're scared. But Grant didn't move. His voice was level, quiet, and sharper than Vivien had ever heard from him. I saw the video, Vivien. The color drained from her cheeks instantly. What video? She whispered. Marcy's doorbell camera, Grant replied. It caught you scratching your arm, ripping the pillow, looking around to see if anyone was watching. Vivien's breath hitched. Her perfectly maintained mask cracked in a single devastating moment. You lied, Grant continued, his tone calm but cold. About Ranger, about Lila, about everything. Vivien tried to recover, stuttering through half-formed excuses. I was frustrated. You weren't helping. I needed your attention. You were so busy and this house was falling apart. Don't, Grant said quietly. Don't make this about my work. You staged attacks. You endangered my daughter, and you tried to take her dog away. Vivien's control snapped. She was replacing me, she screamed, pointing at Lila with shaking fingers. You were always choosing her, always. I needed you to see how unstable she is, how destructive that animal is. I deserved your attention, your support. Lila flinched, but Grant stepped protectively in front of her. You deserved honesty, he said. You chose manipulation. Vivien's breathing turned ragged. You think this proves anything? Without evidence, you can't... I collected evidence, Grant interrupted. Your fingerprints on the bowl fragments. No sign of forced entry on the back door. Hair found exactly where Lila said. And now, your confession. Vivien froze. You recorded me? She whispered. Grant lifted his phone. I'm a detective, Vivien. You think I'd confront you without making sure the truth was preserved? Her face twisted with fury, raw, unmasked, stripped of all sweetness. You'll regret this, she hissed. I'll say you manipulated me. I'll say you threatened me. I'll say... You'll say nothing, Grant cut in, because I already called the precinct. Officers are on their way. Vivien staggered back, suddenly desperate. Grant, please, think about our marriage. There was no marriage, Grant said quietly. Just your performance. Lila, trembling but steady, stepped out from behind her father. Why? You hurt Ranger, she said softly. And you hurt me. That's what you didn't understand. You can't make people love you by scaring them. Vivien's lips parted, but no words came. The sound of police sirens grew louder outside. She turned toward the window, realizing too late that everything she had built, every lie, every scheme, was crumbling around her. And for the first time, Vivien Hale understood. She had lost. The police cruisers rolled to a stop in front of the Brooks home, their flashing lights reflecting across the windows. Vivien stood frozen, her once perfect composure shattered. Grant kept himself between her and Lila as two officers approached the doorway. "Mrs. Hale," one of them said calmly, "we need to speak with you regarding multiple reports and evidence of falsified claims, child endangerment, and obstruction." Vivien's eyes widened. No, this is all a misunderstanding. "Grant, tell them I'm your wife." Grant didn't answer. He stepped aside and the officers gently guided her toward the door. Vivien twisted desperately, her voice cracking. "You're throwing everything away for a child and a dog." Grant's response was steady, unwavering. "No, I'm protecting them." The door closed behind Vivien, her cries fading as the officers escorted her to the cruiser. Lila watched from the stairs, knees weak, but relief washed over her in waves. Grant walked to her slowly, kneeling so he could look her in the eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have listened sooner. I should have protected you better." Lila shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "You're protecting me now." Grant pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, the way a father holds the most important thing in his world. In that moment, every fracture between them began to mend, but Lila's heart had one more ache. Dad, Ranger," she whispered. "What if they don't let him come home?" Grant smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "They will. I made some calls the moment I saw that video. They agreed to reevaluate his case today." Lila's breath hitched. "Really?" "Really," he said. "He's coming home." The words hadn't even settled before a white county van pulled up quietly at the curb. An officer stepped out, opening the side gate. Ranger leapt out, ears perked, eyes bright, tail wagging so fiercely it shook his whole body. "Ranger!" Lila cried, sprinting outside. He ran straight to her, circling, whining, licking her hands, nudging her chest as if making sure she was truly there. She buried her face into his fur, sobbing with pure, overwhelming relief. "He missed you," the officer said with a warm smile. "And for what it's worth, he's one of the most well-behaved dogs we've evaluated." Grant nodded, gratitude swelling in his chest. "Thank you." As the van pulled away, Grant placed a hand on Lila's back. "Things will be different now, better, I promise you." Lila looked up at him, tears still glistening but replaced with something new. Hope. Grant exhaled slowly, watching Vivien's cruiser disappear down the street. Justice had been served, lies had crumbled, truth had won. But the most important victory stood right in front of him. His daughter finally felt safe again. His home was whole again, and Ranger, faithful, loyal Ranger, was exactly where he belonged. In the doorway of their healing family, where no one would ever tear them apart again. And just like that, our story comes to a close. You're still here with us, right? If you truly made it all the way to this moment, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a real human way. So let's breathe together for a second and look at what this story is really telling us. Life sometimes places us in rooms we never chose, just like Lila in that dark pantry. But as Marcus Aurelius wrote, the obstacle is the way. The things meant to break us often reveal our strength. Lila's courage, Grant's awakening, and Ranger's loyalty remind us that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone brave enough to stand with it. Maybe your Vivien is fear, self-doubt, or a voice telling you you're not enough. But healing begins the moment you decide to speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. And remember, loyalty, kindness, and courage will always outlast manipulation and cruelty. If this story made you feel something, hope, clarity, strength, then don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so more people can find stories that heal, inspire, and remind them they're not alone. We're here with you, and we'll walk through the next story together.